All right, so this is going to be an overview of the Moonkin or Boomkin um, balance specialization for the Druid. I'm by no means an expert on the topic, but I do know how it works, and I can sort of show some of the kind of strategies that I use and things that I've done. I will not be going over the setup of all of these things. That'll be somewhat expected on your own, but I will probably include in the description some of my weak auras. Just note that since these are very specific to my UI, they're not necessarily something that's going to be easily adaptable to other people's. But I'll go over sort of what I'm doing and how you'll be able to accomplish a similar effect. So the basic premise of Boomkin is all around your phases, your solar phase and your lunar phase. It's oftentimes referred to as kind of the one spec and class in the game that is really you play the UI, you don't play the game. You know, you don't really so much have a rotation in the same sense. It's all just kind of a Pong style mini game of back and forth, switching the abilities based on the side that you're on. But doing effective damage, as long as you're paying attention to this, isn't actually that hard. Being the best is difficult, but really, as long as you follow some simple guidelines to when you're casting set abilities, your damage by itself, that's just going to make it skyrocket. Whereas if you didn't pay attention to those, you'd be doing, half the amount of damage. And that'll all make sense in a moment here. So, a couple of things. So first off, you have your Star Surge. If you have your class trinket, your Star Surge has a really high chance to proc Starfall as well, which of course allows you to do single target while also doing your AoE rotation more or less at the same time. My talent specialization, I sort of always stick with the sort of generic single target specialization. I don't change anything out um, for other specs because the damage gain isn't really significant enough to really warrant it. And considering that once you have the class trinket, you're able to AOE while doing single target effectively anyways, it really isn't a big deal. So I just run with sort of Displacer Beast, which is nice for teleporting around, Sarah's Gift for passive healing, Typhoon for knockbacks and interrupts. You have to roll with this, definitely, Incarnation Chosen of a Loon for your burst, because that's a really effective and important part of being a boomkin. The timing of it's just tricky. Ursul's Vortex is probably one of your best for PvE. Nature's Vigil is really the only real good choice here because basically this one actually increases some of your damage and also gives some bonus healing as well. Whereas unless you're Resto, Heart of the Wild only helps other forms, that sort of thing. And then Euphoria, which is more or less the single target only um, spec to choose for the final tier, but it's also the easiest to use. So we're just going to roll with that. Glyphs wise, there's nothing super special going on here. I use Glyph of Stampeding Roar for raid utility, Glyph of Barkskin just to help my survivability, and Glyph of Rebirth. Balance doesn't get a whole lot of really effective things. If you're really dealing with moving things that need to be slowed, you can use Hurricane for that, but the damage of Hurricane's pretty low, that sort of thing. There's not a whole lot of amazing things that are going to help you. Um, so that sort of thing. Glyph of Astral Communion would probably be one of the really good ones, and I haven't personally used that. Um, but it is something that could be really effective depending on your situation. But Astral Communion is also very situational, so I prefer to roll with these myself. The only one in here that is important is actually an or a minor glyph, which is the Untamed Stars, which basically normally your Starfall only hits targets that are marked with Moonfire or Sunfire. Now it'll hit everyone, and that's important but dangerous. It sort of turns into the Druid Barrage, only it doesn't even care about the direction you're facing. But it also means that you don't have to go through the tedious task of marking every mob up as they spawn, on fights like Zul'Farrak, for example, just to do, any sort of effective damage against them. They're just sort of passively happening. Stat priority wise, probably already know this, but I'll just go over a little bit. I'm actually in my resto gear right now because I just haven't switched it. But pretty much it's going to be intellect is by far and away your best stat. A mistake that a lot of people make, especially when they're working on progression, is they just go for optimized stats, which is mastery then crit. So int mastery crit, which is great, but the intellect is so valuable that oftentimes, five to 10 item levels higher of an item, even if it's now mastery multi or something like that, or haste mastery, that item is still going to actually be better. So I suggest finding yourself a stat calculator of some kind that takes those weights and the stats into an account, just so you can double check. So my Boomkin spec, I actually roll with a lot of not perfectly optimized items just because they are the best raw output, and of course we're working on our mythic progression. So that is my most important thing to focus on. just going to put my boomkin stuff. DSI will always be your best in slot regardless of the fight. However, Seed of Creation will get swapped out for, against standard single target, you'd want an Iron Reaver Piston or something along those lines. And then you use your Orb of Void Sight if it's a demon. Other than that, it's just whatever the best items you have that are going to, give the most raw damage. If you are trying to parse for bracket, then of course you will want to make sure you're running more optimized gear. So let's go ahead and get into exactly kind of what happens here. So you should probably already know if you're watching this video how the lunar phase and the solar phase works. It's just sort of ping pongs back and forth at a fixed rate. It's no longer based on the abilities you cast anymore. It's just sort of constant. When you Star Surge, your Star Surge will, based on if you're in Lunar or Solar, will empower your Wrath or your Starfire appropriately. So the next two or three, two for Starfire, three for Wrath, next those casts do more damage. And also when you're at peak, it shortens the cast time of those abilities as well. Now, one thing that a lot of people do and they make a mistake of is they just want to use their charges of Starfire or Star Surge because they have it. And that's a big mistake. And I'm going to go ahead and sort of go through a bit of a process here and sort of show you what I mean. So when you do a Star Surge, so we'll go ahead and just start off with, I get 2 charges for Starfire. If I Star Surge again right now, it's back to 2, but I just wasted that empowerment. Whereas if I had waited until I'd ran out, even if it meant we were in Solar, I have a higher chance of always having my my charges rolling, so to speak. So basically what this means is I just effectively wasted that damage boost. So as long as I'm, really paying attention that I'm never overriding a stack, you never want to override a stack. That's a really important thing in all of this, is always be in a situation where you only Star Surge if there's not already an empowered one available. That right there is going to boost your damage a ton. It's a noticeable increase, and it's huge. The other thing is to really make sure that you are casting the right ability in the right phase. So when you're in solar phase, for example, right, when you're on the solar side of things, whether you're in peak or not, peak increases the damage of your Moonfire or your Sunfire appropriately, but just being in that phase increases the damage of that ability that you're casting. And that's really important to know, to make sure that even if you have a Starfire charge available, if you're in solar phase, you should be casting Wrath. And if you have a Star Surge available, you Star Surge first and then cast your Wrath to make it, use the empowered effect. But wait until you're back in Lunar to use that final charge, and don't just immediately override it with another Star Surge and effectively waste that stack. That balance, get it, pun is intended, that balance is what makes this class do damage and do high damage. If you mess up this balance and you sort of just don't pay a whole lot of attention to which side you're on where and what your stacks and what your charges are at, that's where things start to go wrong. That's where your damage really starts to taper off. Because everything is about capitalizing on the side that you're in, basically. This is especially important when you're using your cooldowns, and this is something that can really make or break your overall damage for the fight. I'm actually going to be stuck in combat for ages here because I hit the tank once. Let me run away a second here. So pretty much what happens is when you hit your incarnation and your celestial alignment, those basically you get your damage boost, you get the effect of your solar and lunar phase at the same time. So basically, and you lock the position that you're in. I think I'm endlessly stuck in combat here, aren't I? Nice. Yeah, I am. I can't go back into flight form. All right. Anyways, but that's okay. So pretty much what this means is that if I was to hit it right now, watch what it stops in place, right? So now when I Star Surge, every time I Star Surge, it will only be for Lunar. And this is where it makes a difference, because when you just look at the buff and you see, oh, it's going to affect both equally, I get the benefits of both at the same time. You do, but you only get the effect of one of the types of empowered. Right? So whether or not you're solar empowered or you're lunar empowered, and lunar does more damage than solar. So this is critical. It basically means that you always want to make sure that you are just starting, as close to just starting lunar, but in lunar as you can when you lock yourself with those cooldowns. Because if you don't, then it means that your solar, you will have to be casting Wrath to do effective damage, because all of your Star Surges will be empowering your Wrath, which is less damage than empowering your Starfire. Wow, I can't talk. Anyways, that right there can make a difference of like 20+% DPS during your burst, which of course, as we all know, is a big chunk of a druid's damage, especially when you're dealing with single target fights. And that'll make or break the damage you're doing to some extent. So this is where the attunement comes in, or communion, astral communion comes in. With astral communion, we can accelerate back and forth which way we're going. So if you're in a situation where like you're about to hit Feast of Souls or your Lust Phase, before you pop all your cooldowns, if you're like right here in Wrath, I wouldn't want to lock right there. I will wait until I'm about to come back and then lock right there. I basically lock right as soon as I get back into Lunar. You don't want to lock yourself right before Solar because the moment your astral or celestial alignment wears off, instantly you're in Wrath phase. Whereas if you wait until you're just entering into Lunar, you can actually generally get another Star Surge and a couple more Starfires off while in the correct empowerment. Those are kind of ways to help continue to capitalize on things. Obviously, stacking your ring buff, your potions with these cooldowns is great, but being that they're 3-minute cooldowns, that does get tricky. There's no real rule of thumb here other than just, you need to make sure you're not waiting around a long time to use them. Because while stacking them is great, they're so effective of cooldowns that, you need to just do what you can. Another big important thing to note is that when you're in an AoE fight and you pop those cooldowns, your first priority is to Starfire, or sorry, Moonfire everything around, because during that phase, your Moonfire slash Sunfire combo, they hit like trucks. Like it's just like getting hit by a truck. So the damage and the dot tick is extended. They do way more damage, and they're just amazingly effective. So the first thing you do is you load up those on all your targets, and then you get to your single target rotation, presuming that you're proccing with your Seed of Creation. That's pretty much it, honestly. It all comes down to those timings. There are other cooldowns and there are other things you can use throughout the process. There, obviously for helping in certain raid situations. But from a DPS perspective, it really is all about playing that UI. And really your rotation is dictated by which phase you're in, which you're about to be in. When are you going to finish your cast? Which phase will you be in when you finish the cast? Making sure you're watching those charges. As you can see, I have weak auras that track stat counts. They track all those types of things. This is all still a work in progress. I have a bunch of custom animations from WeakAuras as well to make it nice and visible what's going on. But that is it. That is playing a boomkin, and that is why it's so difficult for a lot of people, is because there are so many sort of stacking buffs to damage based on the phase you're in, which star surge, which empowerment it's procced, those types of things. That if you don't keep track of all that, your damage, you're going to be losing, 3 sets of damage boosters because you're using the wrong ability in the wrong phase. But you keep all that together and you should be good. I don't rank anything special because I have lots of, really high geared resto gear, but it all is better at the end of the day, raw damage wise, for Boomkin as well for me, since, I'm only in Mythic really as a resto. Um, but that is effectively how you do the higher damage and how you do the higher burst. Hopefully this has been somewhat helpful. I know there are definitely things in here I haven't gone over. As far as how you do the rotations. Or sorry, not how you do it, how you gear, which items are technically your best in slots, and kind of the other stuff that comes along with these guides. But I figure, most people at this point with Boomkin know the basics, and it's really just a matter of what little things, what subtleties they might be missing. Um, as far as that goes. So, also I'd like to point out that your mastery, which is stacked, that you're stacking quite a lot of as Boomkin, um, specifically is about Eclipse. So, if you're casting the wrong spell in the wrong side, you are literally making your mastery, your best in slot stat, pointless because you're not using it. You are using the wrong ability in the wrong side. Everything just sort of keeps stacking on each other as far as damage boosts go, and that's what makes Boomkin so hit or miss. Thank you very much, and yeah, that's it.